Peace talks between Russia and the United States have ended. These discussions took over 4.5 hours, and Ukraine was never invited to these peace talks. I want to go ahead and kind of break down what exactly was discussed, what happened afterwards, how Zelensky's reacting, and the world. Before we get started, make sure you subscribe, you turn on notifications, and you give this video a thumbs up. Now, out of the gate, I do have to tell you, it probably went the way you thought it was going to go, in which Russia demanded a bunch of crazy things, the United States didn't stand up for Ukraine, and it kind of left us with nothing afterwards. Because realistically, that's what it was. It was pointless talks since Ukraine was not invited to these talks. For those who maybe don't know what happened today, in Saudi Arabia, there were peace talks between U.S. Representatives Marco Rubio, Steve Witkoff, and Mike Waltz, who spoke against, and realistically, the only one you really need to know, is the Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov. Now, prior to this meeting even happening, Lavrov and his spokespeople came out and actually put out a few different announcements talking about what they wanted from Ukraine. Now, I will tell you, these are the same exact things that they've been demanding from the get-go. First being that NATO can never be inside of Ukraine, ever. There needs to be something in writing saying that could never happen. Next is, when it comes to peacekeepers inside of Ukraine, not only could there be no NATO members or EU members, there should be no other country inside of Ukraine. And then on top of this, they said that there would be absolutely zero concessions when it comes to territory. Things that Lavrov said are things that are like non-starters for Ukraine. Ukraine says we need a NATO membership or a path to NATO membership, and we need peacekeepers inside of Ukraine. Plus, we also need our land back. So it's just like Russia's already saying no to everything. And as we go deeper and deeper into the conversations that happened during these meetings, Russia started demanding more things. Now, before we actually talk about what was said, let's talk about the feelings, just moments after these meetings. Because realistically speaking, there was like no official press conference afterwards where they said, hey guys, these are the ceasefire and things that Russia wants. Okay. The only thing that was really officially announced is what the United States will be doing alongside with Russia in the future, whether it be negotiations for maybe economic ties and other things down the line, which we'll get to in a second. But out of the gate, as soon as the meeting was over, we had U.S. representatives come out and say things such as Witkoff, okay? He says that the meeting was positive, upbeat, constructive. Everyone was there to get to the right outcome. You had Waltz that came out that said that, Trump is determined more than ever to be quickly going through all of this to end the war, and that he's not going to allow an endless war in Europe. That is something that is not acceptable for Trump. Well, on the other end, you had Lavrov and his spokesperson, who said that this delegation talks were not bad, but it was hard to say if the two sides' interests were converging. Then you have Lavrov himself that came out and said that it was a serious discussion of all the issues we wanted to touch upon. We've agreed to take account into each other's interests and develop bilateral relations since both Moscow and Washington are interested in this. And then we had the advisor to Putin, who did say in a statement that it was a very serious discussion of all the issues we wanted to touch upon. We've agreed to take an account of each other's interests and develop bilateral relations since both Moscow and Washington are interested in this. So what did they actually talk about? Well, officially, Marco Rubio pointed out a few different principles in which they kind of agreed to. It's 4 different ones, and I'll read them for you here. 1, to reestablish the fundamentally of our respective missions in Washington and Moscow, aka meaning opening up embassies back in their countries. Number 2, we're going to appoint a high-level team for our end to help negotiate and work through the end of the conflict in Ukraine in a way that's enduring and acceptable to all the parties engaged. First of all, it's weird that he said the conflict in Ukraine. It's Russia's invasion of Ukraine. You can see how he kind of spun some Russian propaganda in that little statement there. And number 2, once again, these talks did not include Ukraine, so not really quite sure how that actually works. Number 3, to begin to discuss and think about, examine both the geopolitical and economic cooperation that could result from the end of the conflict in Ukraine, once again calling it a conflict in Ukraine, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And number 4, the 5 of us who are here today are going to remain engaged in this process to make sure that it's moving along in a productive way. Now that's all the stuff that was said publicly afterwards. After that, though, we started getting information from what was actually said during these meetings. Now, it's nothing groundbreaking in the sense of that, oh, wow, I can't believe Russia wants this, and they want this, they want that. These are things that Russia have been stating since day one. And really, it comes down to a 3-step plan. Russia really wants 3 things to start off, just to start off with, okay? This includes a ceasefire, then elections in Ukraine, and then a signing of a final agreement. Those are the 3 things. Now, here's the issue with this. First of all, Ukraine is never going to be signing a ceasefire until security guarantees with the United States are underway, until Russia agrees to give up land, until Russia agrees that Ukraine could be a part of NATO, until Russia agrees that NATO or EU troops could be inside of Ukraine to protect Ukrainians. So already out of the gate, there's no ceasefire happening at all. Then it comes to elections in Ukraine. And the question I know you're probably asking is, why does Russia want Zelensky out of office so badly? Why are they pushing this narrative that he's not the legitimate president? When, if you remember, and we've said this many of times, he is the president. He was elected by the people in a landslide. The only reason why he's still in power is because Russia invaded Ukraine, and martial law dictates that whoever is in office, we're talking about parliament, local, and of course the president, must stay and continue through the end until it's safe enough for them to have elections. And if there were to be elections today, you know that Russia would be meddling in every way possible. But it still doesn't answer the question, why is it that Putin does not want to deal with Zelensky? And when you truly kind of dive deep into it, it's more or less a jealousy kind of thing. Since day one, Putin has not liked Zelensky. Okay? Zelensky is the people's president. The people love him. Okay? So from the beginning, Putin wanted that kind of attention and love from his people, and he never got it because realistically, when you're a dictator and stealing money and doing horrible things to your people, people tend to not like you, believe it or not. And then when Russia started their invasion, Putin saw that Zelensky was getting all this support. And every single person in this world, except for Russians and maybe China and North Korea, were looking at him going, wow, that is a leader, something that Putin always wanted to be. And that made him angry. So he started pushing all these agendas that he's not the legitimate president, that he is not in power. Actually, it's the Speaker of the Parliament who's in power. When it's like, no, if you know the Constitution, because of what you did, he's actually still in power. And funny enough, I don't think Zelensky would have ever ran for a second term at all. But here we are. We're at a point now to where Zelensky's still kind of uneven whether or not he wants to run again if, say, this war ends. But at this very moment, he's strong. He's in a position to where he is, right now, probably the most liked leader in the entire world. And everyone looks up to him for his strength and everything he's done to help Ukraine and stop Russia. You know, you go back to day one. I don't need a ride. I need ammunition. This guy was willing to put his life on the line multiple times, multiple assassinations, to make sure his country is free. And the people of Ukraine love him for that. And so Putin doesn't want to bow down to Zelensky, someone who is clearly more popular, has more, I would say, more of a threat towards him. And even right now, we're seeing a weird conversation coming out of the Kremlin in which, you know, Putin will have to negotiate with Zelensky, but also points to the fact that if he would had to, well, then any peace talks they have may not be legitimate. And just let me read this quote from you that's coming from the Kremlin that states here, Putin himself has repeatedly said he would be ready to negotiate with Zelensky if necessary, At the same time, the legal fixation of the agreements is subject to serious discussion considering the reality. Which means this. Russia looks like they're trying to put this in, well, if we have talks with them, we'll agree on things, but, Zelensky's technically not in power, so if we have that, then, maybe things don't go our way. Well, then we could challenge the legitimacy of that contract. You can see that they're laying the foundation now for potentially down the line starting the war again. Which means, again, do we do another agreement like that in which we just give Russia time? That's what it kind of looks like. And so Russia is really trying to push the agenda that Zelensky's not the real president. And they're going to push that very hard in the next coming weeks. So just to catch you up to what Russia wants before final agreements, Russia will not give up any land. Ukraine can never join NATO. No NATO or EU troops inside of Ukraine as peacekeepers. There needs to be elections, a ceasefire, and then final agreements. I will tell you that Zelensky will never go for this. Ukraine will never go for this. And the EU will never go for this. Now, United States officials are saying, well, these were just the first talks and it doesn't really mean anything. And, we'll work things down the line. But then you started getting information kind of put out to Fox News, giving a lot of information, some from the Russian and Ukrainian side. And let's break this down because, the talks had finished and then it was almost like instantly we started seeing things pop up. So out of that, Fox News put out that multiple foreign diplomatic sources tell Fox that the U.S. and Russians considering new elections in Ukraine will be a key condition to the success of the settlement process. What makes the situation hilarious is the fact that Russia doesn't hold real elections. So how could you demand for Ukraine to hold elections when Russia does not hold elections? Putin's president again. He's president until he's gone, until he leaves the earth. That's the election that Russians have for Putin, which is just like, okay, you're trying to tell Ukraine to have elections, yet you don't do that here. Then it says a U.S. source familiar with the negotiations have softened this claim, telling people that they're floating the elections piece and it may be part of future talks, but not today. Then Fox put out this readout that was put out by actually multiple different sources, and I want to read it for you in whole. It says, Putin assesses the probability of electing a puppet president as quite high and is also convinced that any candidate other than the current president of Ukraine will be more flexible and ready for negotiations and concessions. In turn, Donald Trump is ready to accept any election result, including the possibility of electing a pro-Russian puppet. Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin consider the chances of the current president of Ukraine being reelected as low. Once again, one of those things is like, oh no, that's not it. That's not right. But then Fox News also gets other reports on top of the functions of what is going to happen here, the main talking points. And those bullet points are this: U.S. Russia to restore diplomatic functions. We talked about them putting those embassies back together. Then Fox News was able to get some kind of information out that there could be a possibility of softening oil sanctions on Russia as concessions. And I just want to stop for 1 second and I just want you to realize what is the possibility with everything that was said just today. Russia is getting everything they wanted. Okay? The NATO troops, whether it be no NATO, we're keeping the land, we're doing this, we're doing that. They could potentially see sanctions being softened. And then from that, the United States is blackmailing Ukraine for their rare minerals. I've yet to hear anything here that benefits Ukraine. Because once again, what do you tell a mom or a dad who lost their kids because Russia decided to throw a drone or a missile into the apartment? What do you say to the dad who was sent to the front lines to go fight and then come back later after being tormented and captured by Russians to find out that his entire family was taken out because Russia decided that a ballistic missile on his house was a smart idea? There is nothing here that shows a path to peace. It was just a meeting in which the United States says, hey, buddy, what do you want? You want all of that? Okay, let me tell them that. Okay, you want anything else? Okay. There was nothing constructive here. It was a list of demands that we've all known for 3 years now. And Putin and Russia have not learned a thing. I don't know where you're watching these videos from. I don't know what country you're from. But I think we can all agree that Russia started this and was the aggressor. They want this war to end. They need to feel pain. They did such horrible things to Ukraine, and yet from this moment, it feels like they're not getting any punishment for it. And if anything, Ukraine is being punished. Because from this point of view, it looks like the United States is just like, oh, Ukraine, take all these things that Russia wants you to do. Oh, we also want half of your natural resources for free. Go. What? And that's where we're at. Now, I do want to read some quotes for you. We got Rubio, Waltz, and then we also have Zelensky. So Rubio says here that in order to bring an end to any conflict, there has to be concessions made by all sides. We're not going to predetermine what those are, but there are some parties that have sanctions. The European Union is going to have to be at the table at some point because they have sanctions as well as other ones have been imposed. This means we're just back at sanctions again, which only just illustrates the unconfirmed but now confirmed information that Russia wants those sanctions off badly. They're bleeding a lot when it comes to money. They want that money back. And then we have Waltz that says, we know just the practical reality is that there's going to be some kind of discussion on territory, and there's going to be discussion on security guarantees. Those are just fundamental basics that will just undergrind and underline any type of discussion, which is almost sort of like, well, yeah, that's the common sense thing. You should have said that to Russia. Like, we have yet to see the United States be strong here and say to Russia, you're in the wrong. You guys have to do X, Y, and Z. I almost feel like they just want Russia just to blurt out everything they're saying. And I'm praying then the United States comes back and goes, you're not getting any of that. But at this moment, it doesn't feel that way at all. And now we get to what Zelensky said and his reaction to it. Now, this being said, Zelensky was in Turkey for this entire thing, and we haven't gotten his full reaction from this in his nightly speech. It's 2 p.m., so, most likely within the next hour that will be put online. But these are some quotes that he did say while in Turkey. Quote, Ukraine, Europe in a broad sense, and this includes the European Union, Turkey, and the UK, should be involved in conversations and the development of the necessary security guarantees with America regarding the fate of our part of the world, saying that any efforts to broker an end to the conflict should be quote-unquote fair. And then, of course, slammed the entire thing, saying that any discussions about Ukraine is realistically just not a discussion at all, but instead of just, Russia throwing up more demands of which we already knew to begin with. And then he was standing beside the president of Turkey and said that let's go ahead and say, let's make Turkey the ideal host for any talks when it comes to ending this war. He mentioned that when the war first started, there were talks that took place in Turkey. So that's back in 2022. And so it makes sense that we just do this in Turkey with someone who is actually fair. And then ended in a press conference by saying, it is crucial that any negotiations to end the war are not happening behind the backs of the key parties affected by the Russian aggression. Essentially saying here that if you want to end this and it's happening in Europe, then these discussions have to happen in Europe with everyone, not the United States, not individual countries, but everyone should be a part of this. Because at the end of the day, if talks fail, Europe would be next. And so Europe needs a seat at the table. All of these discussions have now led to European countries go, so this didn't help. This discussion with the United States did not help, and we have to meet again. And so while there was an emergency meeting that took place yesterday, in which I will have to say, unfortunately, nothing really came of it, another one is going to be taking place on February 19th. And it's now an expanded list. We're assuming so it's the original parties and now more, including Norway, Canada, the Baltic states, the Czech Republic, Greece, Finland, Romania, Sweden, and Belgium. They're all coming together to figure out what to do here. But that was a recap of what happened today. A lot happened here, and realistically, when it comes to these peace talks, nothing happened during that meeting. Russia just demanded a bunch of stuff, and the United States just kind of shook their head for the time being. Hopefully, they come out strong. I'm not really confident, though. They come out strong and they say, hey, look, Russia, you're the one who's wrong here. You guys need to concede more. Just right now, it doesn't feel that way. It looks like the United States is just pushing just to end it, which is not right, because that is not a lasting peace at all. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. Please share my videos and follow me for more.